Hello folks, welcome to Inktober day 3. The prompt is Persephone today, and this is from my prompt list, which is Greek Mythtober. So if you would like to see the whole list, you can see it over on Instagram. And yeah, I'm actually quite pleased with how this one turned out. So I'll talk you through the process and some of the happy accidents that occurred along the way. So without further ado, we'll say hello to Lyra very quickly. You want to say hello? Yeah, that's it. Let's get on with Persephone. So the story of Persephone can be interpreted in a few different ways. So I'm just going to outline the story briefly. There are definitely better sources for knowing the whole thing, but basically Hades, the king of the underworld, who had been banished to look after the underworld, and basically the gods of Olympus don't really like him very much. Questionable whether he deserves that or not, but anyway, so he spends most of his time down in the underworld, but occasionally he would come up to the rest of the world, and one day he spotted Persephone, and of course it's an insta-love story. He falls in love with her and knows that he has to have her, except it's okay with Zeus, but not okay with Persephone's mother, Demeter. She is the goddess of the harvest and of fertility, and Persephone is her most treasured, I don't want to say possession, but she is very possessive over her daughter. So one day, basically, Hades abducts Persephone. And yeah, this is the part where it gets kind of a bit iffy, because it is very much an abduction to start with. So Persephone hasn't even seen Hades at this point. So yeah, it's a bit ick in that sense. And Demeter is very upset about this, understandably. And so she basically she goes about the earth lamenting the loss of her daughter, and she fails to do what she is supposed to, what her role is as a goddess of fertility and harvest. So all the crops fail, and basically we get a winter, a very long winter. And so over time Persephone falls in love with Hades. Again, a little bit on the problematic side. I've heard different ways that this has been interpreted, but yeah, I am quite uncomfortable with that whole idea. I know a lot of people like to interpret it as her going willingly and Hades being misunderstood and all of that, but that's up for debate. Anyway, so Hades wants her to stay in the underworld and remain as his wife. Wants Persephone to stay, and obviously Demeter wants her to come back. So they come to an arrangement where Persephone will go back, but Hades tricks her into tasting fruit of the underworld, which is a pomegranate, sorry. And that's the color basically that I'm using here, the pomegranate red/pink. And yeah, so as she tastes the fruits of the underworld, she is tied to the underworld, but because she only eats half a fruit or a portion of the fruit, she only has to stay in the underworld for half of the year. The other half of the year she can return to her mother and live on Olympus and be happy about in one way or another, or at least Demeter is happy. There's not a lot about Persephone's feelings in this. I think the original Greek myth is pretty scant on that side of things. So, I mean, that's the beauty of mythology, is that it can be interpreted in so many different ways. Anyway, so for the half of the year that Persephone is above in the mortal world, there is spring and there's summer, and when she leaves back to her husband in the underworld, we get autumn and winter. So that's when Demeter is mourning the fact that her daughter is not with her. I think she has some attachment issues. But anyway, basically that explains the origin myth of the the seasons, which is quite wonderful. So yeah, with this image, I wanted to have that pomegranate color, but I didn't want to just use the pomegranate. And yeah, so here I've filled in all the black area, and as you will have seen from the sketch, I have these vines coming around, and I will fill those in a bit. But I'll just talk a bit about the sort of technical side of this. So here I was using a brush, and I'd mixed a silver ink with a pink, what's it called? I think it's called cherry red, but it's not really red, it's pink, or a sort of magenta colour. Anyway, as you can probably see, I'm using the same ink here, but it had separated. So the first bits that I did were that kind of pearlescent silvery colour, and you get that lovely effect on her crown. But then as I went on through the ink I was using, that got less and less, and I was left with pretty much just the magenta colour. So the line work is sort of darker where I did the later parts of it. But I actually really like that effect, and that's one of the wonderful things about working traditionally, is that you get those sort of happy accidents. And this is definitely one of those. I would not have set out to have that kind of effect, but it worked really well, so I didn't paint over it. So here you can see I have penciled in some of those vines, and I've done it, it's quite lightly, but yeah, here we go. So then using gold to go over that, and I wanted something to represent Persephone being tied to a place. So I went with something kind of literal with these vines. I wanted them to look like roots, to feel like the underworld. And whether you want to interpret the myth as Persephone being held against her will, or whether you want to call it her falling in love with her captor kind of thing, either way, I think this works. And so I wanted these to feel very kind of both ominous and beautiful. So using gold instead of using the black on the roots felt like a good decision here to both balance out the composition. It means you've got a nice balance of light and dark, which is also kind of symbolic, but also it makes sense with the story. I didn't want them to seem quite as threatening as they would if I had painted them in black and had a lighter background. Also, I really like dark backgrounds, you might have noticed by now. Yeah, so here I'm going in with some other markers just to give a little bit more shape, a little bit of shadow to those vines, or those roots that are growing and sort of grabbing at her. I definitely could have lent into that a lot more and made them seem a lot more threatening, because they are sort of going in. There's one snaking down her top, or a couple of them snaking down her dress, and one around her wrist, one coming around her neck as well, but they don't seem super threatening. Anyway, so now I've added a little bit of oomph to the hair and her crown by having some white ink on there. And then I went in here and added some white to the roots, but I actually decided fairly quickly that I didn't like that, so I went back over it all with gold. But that's okay, we live and we learn. And like I said, this is kind of the beauty of working this way. You get those happy accidents. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Oh yeah, so here I decided to make it look, it looked a little bit banal still, so I wanted to make it look a little bit more threatening, and we added some thorns. So thorny roots, I don't know. I'm not sure if that works, but it sort of added a little bit more detail to it and made it feel more like something I'd painted. I like to have a lot of detail in my work, so this made it sort of tie in better with the rest of my portfolio. There we go, that is my drawing for Inktober Day 3. If you want to see more of these videos, I'm going to be doing one every single day of the month of October. In fact. So yeah, subscribe to the channel if you want to see these videos, and if you hit the notification bell, it'll tell you when each video is uploaded. They should be around the same time every day. That is the plan. And yeah, if you head over to Instagram, you can see the things that I've done already and look at the hashtag and see what other people are doing for these prompts. And do let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on the Persephone myth, because I know it's a bit of a contentious one. There are different ways of interpreting it, whether Persephone was a willing participant or not. I would like to think that she was, but knowing the way that Greek gods and goddesses work, probably not, let's be honest. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you for day 4 tomorrow.